The man across the table didn't flinch. He read the words like they were printed on a receipt. You are no longer authorized to operate any system within this company. No emotion. Just 14 words. No eye contact. No hesitation. Just a cold verdict that ended 11 years of commitment in 49 seconds. They thought I'd walk out quietly. What they didn't know was that those exact words activated something I had embedded deep within the system. A failsafe they couldn't trace. Indefinitely couldn't reverse. But the unraveling hadn't started in that sterile office. It started 8 days earlier with a flicker in the Sydney Logistics dashboard. A field failed to validate a routine scan. Most would have called it a blip. Minor. Forgettable. But not to me. The timestamp was off by 4 milliseconds. The protocol used wasn't one I had ever approved. And the routing table was showing mirrored loops impossible without interference. I tunneled into the logs. The trail led to Bogota. Pushed through using admin credentials I didn't recognize. A name I'd never seen. I wasn't angry. I was still. Focused. My name is Liana Voss. I'm the lead systems architect behind Stratix Global Logistics. For over a decade, I kept our 10-nation medical transport network alive, optimizing loadouts, building reroute contingencies, once even redirecting blood plasma through 4 countries after a volcanic eruption shut down airspace. I'm not in the photos, but I'm why people get their meds on time. That glitch, it wasn't just data, it was personal, because the platform they tampered with, its name flashed on my monitor. Alara.os. Nobody at Stratix ever asked why I called it that. They never wondered. But Alara was my mother's name. She died when I was 23. Her insulin shipment missed its arrival by 1 day. That failure didn't just wound me, it remade me. I built Alara to prevent what happened to her from happening to anyone else. So when I saw unfamiliar hands reaching into my code, something clenched in my chest. I checked the authorization logs. The override had been approved, but not by me. Someone in leadership had quietly reassigned system control. And if they were bold enough to overwrite me, it meant a bigger move was already underway. I sat back in my chair, slow breath steadying. It wasn't the glitch that frightened me. It was the arrogance. Someone truly believed I wouldn't see it. And they were wrong. That depends on what you're trying to build. He gave a shrug, small and different. Just theoretical. If we ever want to restructure, move certain functions offshore, or make the platform more investor transparent. I nodded slowly. You'd need more than a new framework. You'd need context. You'd need alignment. He didn't flinch. Just muttered noted and turned back to his screen. As I walked out of his office, a tightness wrapped around my ribs. It wasn't what he said. It was what he didn't ask. Not once did he inquire what the system had been built to solve. Not once did he ask about its origins, its costs, or the why behind its structure. He didn't want to understand Alara. He wanted to strip it, repurpose it. Later that day, I returned to my terminal and pulled up access logs. Something itched at the back of my mind. That's when I saw it 3 new administrator profiles added to the root directory, all with level 4 clearance. One of them had pushed the Bogota patch. That level of access had always belonged to me. Until now. Even the air in the building felt different. I passed 2 junior developers near the break room. Tight nods, eyes lowered. They knew something was shifting. By 7 p.m., the halls were mostly empty. I stayed late finishing performance reports, pretending not to feel the unease pressing against my lungs. Passing HR, I heard the hum of the shared printer. A fresh stack of papers sat unclaimed. I glanced down. Restructure candidates? Confidential draft. I wasn't looking for my name, but it found me anyway. Voss Liana, M, top of the list. Red marked. I didn't need to read the reasoning. But I did. Legacy architect, high salary, proprietary system knowledge, risk factor. Next to it, flagged for priority exit. I left the page right there, walked past the elevator, took the stairs. Outside, the Seattle sky had opened up with cold drizzle. I stood beneath the awning, staring up at the lights glowing in Stratix Global's facade, where Alara.os still pulsed in the back end. still operational, still reliable, still mine. They thought they were replacing a part, but I wasn't a piece. I was the foundation. And foundations remember. The list hadn't surprised me. What scared me was what they might break trying to erase me. The next morning I arrived before sunrise. Lights off, silence thick. I sat at my terminal and dove deep. And there, buried inside my system's heart, was a line of code that wasn't mine. Delicate, elegant, and deadly. Back in 2016, after a rival logistics firm suffered a catastrophic cyber attack that ruined millions in refrigerated vaccines, our CEO at the time, Evelyn Grant, summoned me. "I need something," she said, "that shuts us down before someone else can." It wasn't a question. It was a directive, one grounded in trust. So I built it. A single-line kill switch buried under 6 layers of logic and security protocols. Quiet. Undetectable. It didn't look like a command, it looked like a conversation. Something someone might say in passing on a bad day. "You are no longer authorized to operate any system within this company." Liana. 14 words. If spoken by an executive in the correct cadence, the system would recognize it. A failsafe would fire, awaiting my biometric override within 90 minutes. If it didn't receive that override, it would begin a silent shutdown. Gradual, sequential, node by node, country by country, like dominoes. I hoped I'd never need it, but I wasn't foolish enough to believe the world wouldn't change. And now, the logic string tied to that exact phrase had been flagged, modified, by someone I didn't know. I ran the user credentials. The alias was Lazy Blister Admin, but I knew who it was. Bryant Lester. I scanned his employment history. Before Stratix, he'd been with a small tech firm, Praxis Dynamics. 5 years ago, they'd suffered a major system crash that cost them tens of millions and endangered medical deliveries across Latin America. I was the one brought in afterward to consult. I traced the issue to a flawed security module installed by a young, overeager VP. The name hadn't meant anything to me then, but it does now. He'd tried to hide that mistake, spin it, and now he was inside my system doing it again. I backed up Alara's current build, then saved a clean copy of the original 2019 architecture untouched. I logged out, opened my private dev notes module, and typed one quiet entry. They're not just editing code. They're rewriting memory. The system map blinked open. Bogota, Sydney, Nairobi, flickering. Not read yet, but no longer idle. They had pulled the first thread, and I was the only one left who remembered how it was stitched. Alara wasn't just code. It was story, structure, safety, and stories don't shut down quietly. I met with Michael Sales, my longtime legal advisor, in a quiet cafe between 2 shuttered shops. We reviewed my original files, time-stamped, before I ever joined Stratix. "This is yours," he said, setting down the screen. "Legally, ethically, absolutely." But I didn't build it to own it. I built it to protect them. And now, I had to fight for what I never meant to keep. That's what hurt the most. Back at Stratix, I hadn't even finished logging in when Bryant's email hit my inbox. No subject, no preamble. Just drop by my office before noon. His office was pristine. Minimalist to the point of lifeless. No papers, no photos, not even a clock. He didn't invite me to sit, just slid a cream envelope across the desk. "This is your disengagement package," he said, flat as glass. "No drama. No scorched earth. We appreciate your work, Liana." But the board's shifting direction. "We're going lean." I opened the envelope. 2 pages. Buried in legal sugarcoating and detached corporate tone. A severance amount that wouldn't cover 3 months of rent in Seattle. In return, I'd hand over all system documentation, remain silent about Alara's architecture, and agree not to consult for any logistics firms for 2 years. I looked up. "You're calling this clean." He gave a thin smile. "It's market standard. Consider it an elegant close. An elegant close for 11 years of my life." I didn't argue. Didn't rip the pages or raise my voice. I nodded, slid the envelope into my folder, and walked out. If this story moved, you don't forget to hit subscribe, because what happens next in Liana's journey will challenge everything you thought you knew about loyalty, legacy, and leadership. But once the elevator doors closed, something twisted tight in my chest. Not rage, not even surprise. Recognition. This wasn't miscommunication. It was erasure. That night, I poured a glass of wine I never touched, just stared at that envelope on the table for almost an hour. Then I opened my laptop muscle memory more than plan. I didn't know what I was searching for until I found it. No subject, no sender name, just a Stratix system address. One line in the body. They're gutting your system for a fast IPO push. Ask about Bogota. Gutting, not refining, not simplifying, gutting. I opened the logs, and there, it was dozens of modules flagged for removal. Redundancy logic, conflict mediation layers, adaptive rerouting scripts, all the features that kept shipments flowing when weather stalled planes, when strikes halted borders, when governments changed policy overnight. Now marked non-essential. Bogota had already suffered 2 unreported outages that week. I checked the logs, they hadn't fixed them. They'd buried them. They weren't optimizing Alara. They were carving it up to look leaner for shareholders. For a moment, I considered signing that agreement, starting over. But then I remembered the girl in Manila whose cancer meds rerouted during a monsoon. The farmer in Tunisia whose insulin arrived mid-curfew. You don't cut the brain out of a living system and expect it to breathe. I slid the envelope into my drawer, unopened, unsigned, and opened a new file. If they push, I pull. These days, disaster didn't arrive with sirens or storms. It wore a tailored gray blazer and smiled while handing you a disengagement clause. I logged in from the sub-level terminal and accessed the last stable build of Alara. Alara.os.stable, RIT 2019 orig. The untouched version before Bryant's team started carving it up for IPO appeal. I began the backup. Watching it load was like tracing my own heartbeat, file by file, folder by folder, routing protocols, emergency delivery logic, regional redundancy frameworks. Each module carried fingerprints of late nights, lost weekends, and life or death decisions. Some lines of code I wrote while waiting for lab results. Others, after the Jakarta reroute, saved 2 NICU infants from expired meds. When the system prompted for module documentation, I entered every note, every rationale, every variable until I reached the domino clause. That one I left blank. No explanation, no comments. Just a silent omission only I would notice. The system blinked. Warning incomplete documentation detected. Proceed. Anyway, I clicked yes, because you don't teach people how to dismantle a weapon while it's still armed and still necessary. At 93% complete, a pop-up flickered. Not from the local network, but from a deeply buried secure comms channel I hadn't touched in years. Secure channel request, R. Calderon. My breath caught. Renee Calderon had been one of the most brilliant consultants Stratix ever contracted. Quiet, sharp, ethical. He'd left 3 years ago. Long before Bryant's arrival, his message appeared, "Your biometric trigger is still active across all nodes." I typed. Confirmed his reply came instantly. Tested from Sydney node this morning. Your signature still pings clean. I exhaled. They hadn't disabled me. They couldn't. My failsafe built into the bones of Alara still saw me as the key holder. They'd renamed files, rewritten interfaces, and restructured access trees. But they missed the trigger. 14 words. Spoken aloud in the right tone. It would start a process no one else could stop. I unplugged the drive. My pulse was calm, but my hands carried the weight of restraint, not fear. Precision under pressure was always my default. They were gutting the system to look agile. But if it failed, I'd be the ghost they blamed in the logs. So I left a single note in Alara's root logs. If they break it, they'll break it with me still inside. As I left the building unnoticed, I thought the fallout would stay technical. But then I saw the name. David Kamau, age 24, Nairobi. And just like that, the consequences stopped being theoretical. David had just been the one standing there when it broke. Nothing more. That night, I booked a flight to Nairobi. No one asked me to. No one even knew I was going. I used my own money, an old set of credentials, and a company badge I hadn't touched in years, the kind that still smelled faintly of servers and stress. The airport was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes everything feel heavier. The gate agent barely looked at my ID. On the flight, I stared out over the curve of the earth, the lights of distant cities blinking softly below. And I thought about the promise I made to myself years ago, back when Alara was just a collection of sketches on my dining room table. This system will not fail the people it's meant to protect. That was the purpose. That had always been the purpose. I met David Kamau when he was a nervous intern, barely 20. I remembered him asking me, wide-eyed, "What's it like building something that saves lives?" I'd smiled and said, "Ask me when it still works without me." When I stepped into the Nairobi office the next morning, he froze. "Ms. Voss?" he stammered. I know I said before he finished, "I'm not supposed to be here." He handed me his logs. Shoulders sagged, voice tight. "They think I caused it." I nodded, because it didn't matter what anyone thought. What mattered was what the data said. By noon, I had isolated the problem, an unvalidated sync script pushed from the Sydney optimization team. A line of code that made sense on paper but failed in the field. I patched the loop, reinitialized the queue, drafted the internal report myself, and slid it across the desk to David. "Put your name on it," I said. "Not mine." His eyes widened. "You fixed it." "You were never the problem," I replied. That night, I visited one of the affected clinics. A nurse, visibly drained, whispered, "We almost gave up." Then the trucks came. I didn't explain who I was. I just nodded, then left. The next day, I flew back to Seattle. No fanfare, no headlines, just node logs reading queue restored. Impact contained. Because I didn't want credit, I didn't want applause. I just wanted Alara to do what I built it for, protect the ones who'd otherwise be forgotten. On the flight, a message pinged. Frankfurt unstable. Singapore dashboard down. The threads were unraveling, not from outside attack, but from inside decay. It was time to stop responding and start defending. It had to be something beyond the original failsafe. Quieter, smarter. I called it Watch Layer. Unlike the old kill switch, Watch Layer wasn't designed to shut the system down. It was built to listen, to monitor, to track the subtle ripple of human error masquerading as improvement. I wrote its rules to detect very specific patterns: simultaneous node overwrites, unauthorized logic stream injections, mass deletion of error logging protocols, and I gave it one trigger: 14 words. If anyone anywhere spoke those words aloud, Watch Layer would escalate, not to notify, not to warn, but to act. As the code compiled, I synced it into the passive memory core. No fanfare, no flashing indicators, just a single line listening true. No one would even know it was there. They believed I was walking away, but I wasn't walking. I was embedding myself deeper than ever. I leaned back in the chair, eyes closed. Maybe, just maybe I'd finally let them destroy what they didn't understand, and let the collapse be their own making. But then I opened the diagnostics panel just out of habit and froze. Singapore, Frankfurt, Sao Paulo. 3 nodes, minor but increasing packet delays. I drilled deeper. A recent patch had been pushed by the new efficiency ops team, meant to optimize load balancing across global regions, but they'd skipped validation. The update ignored timestamp syncs between nodes. Not a bug. Not yet, but a fracture in the system's spine. One more patch like that, and the dispatch logic tree would begin to collapse in on itself. Nodes would think others had failed. They'd reroute unnecessarily. Loop, overwrite, stack. A slow inside-out failure. Already in motion, already spreading. I didn't fix it. I didn't send a memo. I opened a private log, encrypted it, and sent it to one address, rr.calderon.secure.iprotonmail.com. Subject, in case I disappear. Final log entry. They've pulled the wrong wire. The next one will snap. I shut everything down. The silence felt heavier than the data. I left the building the way I came, in shadows, not alarms. No one noticed. At home, I didn't sleep. Just sat with the city noise beyond my window and the cursor blinking on my screen. One black terminal, one waiting trigger, and deep inside a Lara watch layer was listening. And then, so was Bryant. At 8:01 a.m., I got the message. No subject. No explanation. Meeting with COO, immediate. I already knew. This wasn't a meeting. This was the execution. A thread inside me pulled tight, then let go. He had said it. They had spoken the words. Not me, them. I looked at Bryant. Not through him, not past him, at him. He didn't blink. Didn't realize what he'd done. Didn't feel the pulse shifting through the backbone of the infrastructure below. I said nothing. There was no protest, no plea. This wasn't a conversation. It was a switch being flipped. I turned and walked to the door. My footsteps quiet on the tile. In the hallway, I passed a small security camera above the exit sign, its LED glowing green. Recording. That moment, that phrase, captured in sharp digital memory. They hadn't just dismissed me. They'd activated the system. And Alara remembered. I stepped into the elevator, alone. It hummed downward in silence. My phone vibrated in my pocket, but I didn't reach for it. I already knew what it would say. In the lobby, I checked. Watch layer. Status verbal trigger confirmed. Sequence initiated. Node 19, Singapore. Sync instability detected. Node 29, Frankfurt redundant protocol loop. Node 39, São Paulo. Dispatch delay. Escalating. I stared at the screen, numb. They had cut the wire, but they didn't realize the circuit was live. Outside, the morning air was crisp. A breeze swept down Spring Street, laced with espresso and exhaust. People passed me by, phones to ears, coffee in hand, moving forward like nothing was unraveling beneath their feet. Inside that glass building, the clock still ticked. The cameras still rolled. And the system, the one they gutted without ever understanding, was finally responding. Not to vengeance, to logic, to the protective measures they had ignored. Overwritten, undermined, and undone in 49 seconds. From the moment I entered that room to the moment they lit the fuse. Not by rage, but by arrogance. And with 14 words. No explosion, no alarms, just silence. The kind that settles in the bones when something irreversible has begun. I didn't go far, just 3 blocks. A quiet cafe where I used to write code on Sunday mornings. The baristas didn't recognize me. That was fine. The window booth was open, as if waiting. I slid into it, coat beside me, laptop closed. No credentials now, no ports, no live feeds. The system had forgotten me, but my code hadn't. My phone buzzed again, then again. Singapore offline, Dubai looping, Frankfurt unresponsive. Is this you? One message read. I turned the phone face down. They had pressed the button. I had only built the response. Not all at once, at least not yet, but the signals were spreading like cracks across glass. And I just sat there, in my corner booth, the quiet epicenter of a storm no one on the street could see coming. Didn't you used to work at Stratix? The voice came from the counter, one of the baristas. Young, curious, and not unkind. I offered a tired smile. A long time ago. He nodded and turned to grab a new order, unaware that the system routing his supply chain had just lost sync across 3 continents. No one knew. Not yet. But I did. And for the moment, I was the only one carrying it. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't triumph. This was a slow collapse I had warned them about. The same collapse they asked me to protect them from before they pushed me out. My coffee had gone cold. I didn't notice until I brought it to my lips. I set it down with a quiet clink, leaving a perfect ring of condensation on the tabletop. I opened my laptop. No access, no ports, no nodes. It didn't recognize me anymore. Then one new email arrived. No subject, no signature, just a system-routed message from an address I hadn't seen in years, Nairobi.Operations Stratix Global. Come. We know what you did. We want in. This isn't sabotage. This is defense. If you're building something new, don't do it alone. We remember the Nairobi team. I stared at the screen. They knew not everything, but enough. Someone else had chosen to understand. And more importantly, to stand with me. I didn't reply. Not yet. I marked it unread, closed the laptop, and stared out the cafe window. The world outside kept moving unaware, but silence echoes. And mine had finally reached someone who remembered. By morning, the calls began. The first block number. No message, just silence. The second, Brian's voice tight and brittle. Liana, we need to talk. There are discrepancies. I let it sit. Then Stratix Legal called asking for clarifications on modules now inaccessible due to unexpected credential failures. They wanted a timestamp, a quote, a name to blame or beg. Then the CEO called. Liana, it's critical. All logistics platforms are unstable. Please, can you help? Just tell us what to do. I read it twice, not for understanding, just to figure out what part of me still felt anything at all. Finally, I opened a new message and typed protocol activated. System integrity compromised. Contact architect, no greeting, no signature. I hit send and took another sip of cold coffee. Back in 2016, the former CEO asked me one simple question. What would it take to make this system theft-proof? I didn't give a speech. I gave him code. Code that recognized only one biometric signature mine. Retinal scan, pulse rhythm, subdermal pressure profile. A triad so specific no one could fake it. So when they erased me, the system didn't just lock me out. It lost its ability to trust anyone. Another call came in, this time from the CEO himself. I let it ring twice before answering. Liana, he said, voice sharp with panic. We've lost Frankfurt. Singapore's dashboard is frozen. Dubai's fallback is in a recursive loop. No one can get in. I know, I said. Is there a way to stop it? I let the silence stretch. Then answered flatly, not without root confirmation. But that was removed. You removed it, I said. A beat of silence. Then softly, is there anything we can do? I breathed in, slow and steady. You wanted control, I said quietly. Now you have it. So does the chaos. I hung up. Outside, the sky was gray and stretched thin, like something overhead was tearing apart. I gathered my things and stepped into the cold. On my phone, the tracker showed 6 of 9 countries marked unstable. Each node displayed the same line, override required. Architect biometric signature. No match found. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not out of spite, but because they finally understood the cost of deleting the one person who built the system they relied on. By the time I got home, the headlines were already scrolling across my screen. Stratix Global suffers $470 in losses. During logistics meltdown, 9 nations affected. Then came the story I wasn't ready for Nairobi. A reporter stood beside a stalled vaccine truck, breath tight. Shipments to Kiambu County delayed 48 hours. Several rural health centers have exhausted backup stock. My mug rattled slightly on the counter. I hadn't touched Alara in 3 days. I thought stepping back was enough. But this wasn't about uptime anymore. This was people. And silence, which once felt like strength, now felt like cruelty. I opened my laptop, typed in the 14-word phrase. The system responded instantly. Biometric trigger accepted. No lawyers, no signatures, no terms. I sent it to 9 engineers, 1 per country. The ones I trusted. With the code, I wrote only one line, just fix what they broke. And they did. Singapore lit up first, then Frankfurt, then Dubai, then Nairobi. 1 hour later, first vaccine batch delivered. No fatalities. Thank you. And for the first time, I cried. The crisis had passed. But now, the story had fuel. A whistleblower leak surfaced online, internal emails flagged and time-stamped 6 weeks before the global crash. Once we replicate core logic, we can offboard Liana before IPO filing. Major savings. The memo spread like wildfire. A tech ethics blog ran the headline, "Stratix executives erased the architect of their own infrastructure." Then came the avalanche Reddit, exposés, LinkedIn essays, news segments with industry veterans shaking their heads. This was built by her. Profits at what cost? I didn't comment, didn't repost. I just sat at my desk listening to a world finally connecting the dots. Then a photo appeared on my feed I never expected. Stratix's CEO. No longer smug, no longer composed. At a press conference, chin dipped, voice rough. We gravely misjudged our leadership decisions. We underestimated the complexity of our systems and the woman who designed them. I turned off the screen. Outside, the Zurich morning was brisk, but the air felt clean. I stepped onto the small balcony of my new flat, wrapped in a scarf, exhaling a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Back inside the blueprints for ArdiaNet sat open on my desk, a decentralized logistics platform. Ethical by design. Not created for shareholders, but for people. My eyes drifted to a blinking tab on the edge of the screen. From Nairobi. Engineering subject. We're building something. Liana, it's time. Join us? I smiled and typed back, yes. That sunrise cast soft gold across a new beginning. My new office bore no title, just clarity. ArdiaNet wasn't backed by venture capital, it was built by conviction. The logo etched into the wall behind me read ArdiaNet Global Trust Human First. Beside my keyboard, a plain envelope. No sender name. Inside, a note handwritten. You were the real architect all along. I only wish we'd seen it sooner. MC Marcus Calderon. Former CEO? No apology. But it didn't matter. Recognition didn't change the past. But it shaped the future. On my screen, initialize watch layer, I typed the 14-word phrase. This time, not to collapse a system, but to awaken one built with integrity. 9 countries connected. Not rushed, not redacted. Just ready. A soft ping. 3 familiar faces appeared on the screen, executives from companies that once competed. Now, partners. One leaned forward. We don't just want your software, Liana. We want your values. I smiled. Not out of pride, out of purpose.